Hey everybody, Kristian here with a note on this week's show. In this episode, we take on the question, why should you race? The discussion that follows focuses in on this question from a racer's perspective. We wanted to give you the heads up that we're going to be taking on the coach's perspective in the next episode. So be sure to tune in for that one. All right, enjoy the show.
3, 2, 1, 0, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Donuts and Bikes, the mountain biking coaching podcast. Your hosts are Kristian and Paul, and we're here to discuss the skills, techniques, and tactics we've used to progress our riders and coaches over the past 20 years to become more skillful and confident, and ultimately have more fun on bikes. So click into a harder gear and get ready to dig deep into some of these skills.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Donuts and Bikes, Season 3. We're excited to kick the season off with an episode today on racing and how to race and why everybody should race. But good to see you again, Kristian. Great to be back. We've had a little bit of a break. Maybe you can tell our listeners what we've been up to the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, awesome, Paul. Thanks. Good to see you as well. Happy to be back here. And May traditionally is like training month. At least here in the North Carolina mountains, doing a lot of PMBIA courses, getting people ready for the season, a lot of staff training for summer camps. We have a huge summer camp program here in the mountains of North Carolina. And so they're all ramping up to have all of their campers in, and a lot of them have mountain bike programs. And so there's a lot of that going on. And so been specifically working with the camp in Brevard for a bunch of years, and most recently trained their staff and some guiding and some basic safety protocols and how to have fun with bikes with kids in the woods.
Sweet.
Yeah. So it's been good. Ready to kind of jump into the summer.
Yeah. It's been crazy here. Like it's hardly rained at all, which is pretty rare for us in the spring in Whistler, and the trails are like kind of mid-July, August conditions right now. It's lovely. Wow. It's really nice. Like, as an Englishman, I'll never complain about lack of rain. But at the moment, I'm like, oh, we need rain. Otherwise, everyone's just worried about fires. But no, it's been good. I've been busy too. I've been doing a ton of similar thing, just staff training for ZEP, and then Whistler trainers camp for the PMBIA crew. So that was cool. We had about 30 trainers up in Whistler and going over all the 2023 updates. And stoked to be back on the podcast to talk more about bikes and more about coaching. So for season 3, we wanted to kick it off with a little bit of a focus on racing, because this weekend is the first Downhill World Cup. We've had Enduro World Cup races already. So, we're really in the start of the season for mountain bike racing, which is a really cool side of the sport. And it's interesting from my perspective as a coach and as a rider, is seeing how many people ride, how many people coach, at least in this weird little bubble that we live in Whistler, but how few people, relatively speaking, race. So that's really the topic of today is how to race and why everyone should give it a go at least once or twice in their lifetime. So maybe let's talk about barriers first of all, Kristian. Like, what are some things or reasons why you think maybe people don't race or don't feel comfortable doing it, or don't choose to do it, or perhaps they just don't see it as something they're interested in? Like, what are some reasons why people don't race, do you think?
Yeah, it's a long list.
Yeah. You could come up with a huge list of excuses.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll start personally, and I haven't done a ton of racing, and we hosted Beach Mountain Resort here in Western North Carolina hosted Gravity Nationals 2 years in a row.
Oh yeah.
2011 and 12, I believe. and so that was kind of the beginning for me, at least, of like a journey into racing and getting excited about that. And prior to that, I think me and several other people I know that rode would choose not to race simply just out of lack of knowledge about what racing was about, and some like preconceived judgments about racing,
Yeah.
and really just wanting to ride bikes. But like digging deeper into that, as I actually went into training for racing and going through those races, kind of realizing that I had kind of put barriers on myself about worrying about what other people think. Where should I be in the within the rankings, all that kind of like results oriented kind of stuff, and in that kind of like this personal anxiety around not performing well, not being what I as good as I think I am. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of people share with racing, because one thing to go out and ride your bike with your buddies and have a good time and
Yeah.
feel like you're performing well and are performing well, but then to go up against a clock, especially in downhill racing, where it's it's often one run,
Yeah.
or you're part of a series, and you're looking at standings and points, and that it's there's a lot of pressure to it. So
Yeah. Totally. And I think one thing you said there, which kind of struck a chord with me, is people's perceptions of it. It's like those perceived, sort of that prejudice towards racing. They assume racing is like this or like that. Partly because I think we're so influenced with if you're watching any kind of media these days, you're watching professional sport, professional racing. So if you've never raced before and the only experience or exposure you've had to racing is professional racing, then obviously you're going to have these kind of preconceptions of what it is or what it isn't. So I think a nice place to start is like almost drawing a line between amateur racing, local racing, versus pro racing that you watch on the internet or watch on your TV. What are some differences you found in the past between those two, like a local race in the woods versus, a provincial or national cup or even a World Cup?
The culture, kind of the culture and atmosphere around both are very, very different.
Yeah.
In some ways, the pressure obviously is very different, but the local races, the local series here in Western North Carolina are very community focused, community oriented. It's a lot like going out and being with your friends and being with the larger community. And there can be like a sense of camaraderie and a lot of support, and almost like in some ways like you're going to a giant bike party with your buddies.
It's just a party in the woods.
It is, right?
Yeah.
And so the pits are set up that way, and the parking lots, and it can be a bit of a homecoming, for the community as well. And so there's that, and then elevate that to the pro level, and you're seeing that the same kind of setup, but at a different level.
Yeah.
And the times that we've been around it here in the Southeast, there's a bit of fandom that comes with that. And what's cool about USA Gravity Nationals was amateurs and pros were practicing together.
Yeah.
And so you might be checking out lines and have been standing right next to Aaron Gwynn, and you're looking at the same thing you're going to be racing. You're obviously racing in, or I was racing in a very different category, but you're looking at the same trail, which is really cool. But then to be a part of that and see it and see the time differences and really kind of sharpens the focus of what's going on between the two, local versus kind of a national thing.
I think it's cool. I think too, like there's probably a perception that pro level racing is a lot more serious than it is, versus amateur racing, like, and vice versa, like that people might sort of think a local race is pretty chilled out and, family friendly, and it is, and it's not that serious. But I always find like opposites in each scenario. Like you can have World Cup athletes, top 10 athletes, and their goal for the weekend is just to hang out with the team, hang out with the mechanics, have a good time, hopefully get on the podium. Like it's crazy how casual some of the best in the world can be versus, you go to an amateur event and you've got like a 14-year-old kid like stressing out, putting way too much pressure on themselves because they want to try and get on the podium because they want to get up to, I don't know, junior or junior expert next year, or the next category up next year. So it's funny. I think the takeaway for me is like for why people don't race is it's those preconceptions. And I think the best thing you can do is just go to a race and find out what it is or isn't in your perspective. And ultimately, I think the race can be whatever you want it to be. Like, I think people don't race because they're scared, they're intimidated. Maybe they don't know the track, or they're worried they're going to have to go too fast and crash. I think I hear that one quite a lot. Like, have you raced before? Oh, no, I don't want to get hurt. Well, no one's going to force you to do anything you don't want to do on the race other than you. I mean, that's the cool thing about mountain biking, especially downhill races, is like you still decide what you want to ride and how fast you want to ride. And I think that's, if you kind of go from why people don't race and maybe why you should race, I mean, I think it's a good one to start with, is just learning that discipline to not let external factors affect your own thoughts or your own performance. Like there's this sort of perceived pressure, like, oh, I should do well, and I'm worried what people might think, or I don't want to look bad in front of other riders. But in a way, you can't control any of that, and you can't control any of that in your own life anyway. So why worry about it? Like, you're not racing for anyone else other than for you. So going to the race and just learning to stay in your own head and do your own thing and follow your own plan. It's an amazing skill that translates to all areas of your life. That you can translate that to work or school, is not letting others impact the way you think or the way you perform. It's key. And I think racing is great for that. I was talking to a kid the other night, and he was doing one of the Fat Wednesdays here, and he's a little nervous, and he's like 14, and he's on our Zep Grom team. And I was like, dude, it's just changed the word race to ride. And you're just going on a ride and someone happens to be timing you. That's it. You're riding down the trail you've ridden before, and you're just going to go and have a good time. And that's it. It's like, that's the goal for most amateur racers, is just ride down the track, try your best, but don't stress about it. Just ride down it, try your best, and you just happen to get time at the end of the day. So a lot of it just boils down to like, why people don't race. It's them letting all these sort of perceived, this sort of perceived pressure controlling things, or it's them kind of letting the preconceptions of what it is or what it isn't kind of impact the way they think before they've actually just gone and experienced it. What are some other reasons why you think people should race, Kristian? What are some benefits you've had from it in the past?
Let me go back here just a second.
Oh, yeah.
Just to highlight a key point of what you just talked about here, with the perceived pressure. And if you layer into that goal setting, for the race, but as we talk about with coaching, is setting quality goals, creates the plan, right?
Absolutely.
And so if we think about going into a race, and if your goal is winning or being on the podium or this, then that's going to steer everything that you do into that direction. And then when the results don't happen the way that you want, then that can cause tension, right?
Yeah.
But setting the goals of, I want to give 100%, I want to perform at my best, it's changing how the goals slightly are phrased can be a very helpful approach to this.
I think that's cool. And that kind of how we can dig into that maybe a little bit later, but like really building on like the process, focusing on the process and not the outcome.
Right.
Racing inherently is sort of outcome based because everyone's obviously focused on the result, right? Like that's kind of the whole point of racing, really, on the surface of it. But really, like it's a very thin surface. Like really, the benefits of racing are everything that's underneath the surface. It's the process to get to there. That's really the value of racing, I think.
Right. Yeah. So in terms of other reasons people don't race, I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair enough. Like bikes are expensive already.
Right. Then add into that your entry fees and blocking out a weekend, the opportunity cost for this. And then in the training, and it, again, back to goal setting, how you set up your training for what you're trying to achieve then dictates a lot of time of an individual. And then there's not just expense, but your equipment as well, to perform on, in certain venues, your standard bike that you may use every day might not be the optimum thing. And that then creates tension for people as well. Do I try to buy something different or, so.
That's a good point. Like they kind of feel like, oh, I can't race, my bike's not good enough. Right. And it, for me, I've done a fair bit of amateur racing over the years. And I've been to a lot of races and either in them or coaching them or just watching them. And it's crazy how many times I've seen a racer come down the track with just a beat up kind of
right.
Really, really crummy bike, but they don't care.
They're loving it.
They're loving it. It's not slowing them down, really. It's certainly not reducing any fun factor. Like I always say to people, like as long as your bike's strong and in good working order, like you can race any bike. The first downhill I raced was when I was a kid, and I raced it on a hardtail. And everyone else at the time that's when full suspension just started to come in, and I had clipless hardtail with a 1-inch suspension fork on the front. And the mechanic in my bike shop, I asked him, like, oh, I'm going to do this downhill race and I don't have a suspension bike. And he was like, just go faster. You won't feel the bumps anyway. And that's that just shows the state of the sport back then, because It was actually kind of true. You just pedal faster and it kind of smoothed it out. But yeah, I mean, I had by far the worst bike there in my first downhill race ever, but I wasn't last. So I don't think I'd ever race on that bike again, but
right.
Yeah.
Right.
It kind of proves the point.
Hey, some reasons we should race. We've kind of, we're kind of in there in that zone. Anyway, I think one starting point for us here is the idea of setting something in the future that you can look forward to, train forward, and anticipate. It can give direction to your day to day.
Yeah.
And that process can become a really powerful thing for individuals. Yeah. And if you know that there's an enduro series, or here at the Downhill Southeast, whatever it is, it gives focus to what you're doing on a bike. For some folks that maybe have been riding bikes for 5, 7, 8 years, you might be in a bit of a plateau. Yeah. Not kind of really knowing where their biking is going. You sign up for something like this, and all of a sudden you've got a reason to train. You got a reason to get out there and ride. Yeah. Got a reason to get fitter, to eat better, sleep better. Right. And so it gives that kind of the consistency of athletic performance, like in your day-to-day life, which that's a super, super valuable thing.
It's huge. Like, personally talking about, like, from my experience, like when I first moved to Whistler, like I made a point of racing every Fat Wednesday that I could for about 4 or 5 years, and a lot of the toonies as well. And it wasn't because I wanted to necessarily be a racer. It was just, for me, it was purely a path to gauge my progression against, just fast people in the community, and the level of riding here is crazy. So, for me, it was purely a training tool, and I guaranteed I improved my riding way quicker purely because I try to race every year. And I did that for a long time. And there's one thing to ride a trail, but then when you try and race the same trail, it just completely changes it. I think that's maybe another reason why racing is so good, because if it's a trail, and then suddenly you're trying to race it, it's almost like it's a brand new trail again.
It totally is, right?
Yeah, and it's so fun. And I think in that sense, it's a huge confidence builder, like, because you have that goal setting with the process, and hopefully you just keep working away on it and you see the results. Like, maybe the race isn't in your home trails, but if you pick a home trail and you start to time yourself on it, and you start to try and race that trail, and you start to sort of drop 5 seconds or 6 seconds or 10 seconds, whatever it is, from that trail, like, that's a cool confidence builder. And you're doing that on your own, and all you're doing is just mentally, you're just turning a local trail into a race trail, and you're gradually trying to improve your time over down the trail or up the trail if it's a cross country climbing segment that you're looking at. Like, it's a cool confidence builder.
Yeah, absolutely. And layering in with that, the confidence is learning to deal with anxiety, fear, and recovery. And there's all other mental aspects that are kind of sandwiched in there with it.
It is huge for that. Like, I've really struggled with like my fear and anxiety at races, and it's been an amazing tool to push me. Like, I've done a lot of Crankworx races over the years, and they're pretty stressful because there are pros hanging around, and there are lots of semi-pros. And for me as a coach in the community, I don't want to look like a complete muppet, because a lot of people know I'm a coach here. I run my own coaching company. So that's probably perceived pressure I'm putting on myself. Like, they probably don't care, or they don't even know that I'm racing. But in my head, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
And so you kind of have all these perceived pressures put on yourself. And I think that's why racing's been so good, because it's helped me like deal with that. And you can't get stronger or better unless you challenge yourself. And racing is just another brilliant tool to learn how to deal with a lot of those anxieties or stress and success and failure. I think that's the other reason I love kids racing. Like, we have a bunch of kids in our programs here that race, and it's purely process based, and it's purely a tool for them to like genuinely learn for the first time. Like, some of these 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are racing, it's like the first time they're genuinely learning how to lose and or how to win and be graceful under when you win, or how to lose but still be happy for your friend that did really well. Like, seeing 9, 10-year-old girls and boys like learn those life skills when they're like, I crashed and I'm super bummed I didn't get on the podium, but my friend did and she's really happy. And like, seeing a 9-year-old go through that is brilliant. And it's actually kind of the same for adults too. Like,
well, it is, and what you're talking about there is this. It's a bit of like a gratitude approach to what you're doing and the people that you're around. And it's so much of what we're conditioned to think about in terms of competition is we're against someone, right? Need to be, they're going to be better, or we're going to be better.
Yeah.
And in the end, somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to take the top spot for sure. Yeah. But the act of being genuinely happy for that person, if you're not on the podium, that's a really cool gift that you can give to someone.
Well, and the other thing too is internally, like, seeing a kid that like, or an adult, like, or a young adult, like, basically in their mind fail. Like, they wanted a top 10, or they wanted whatever they wanted, a top 20 or a podium or a win, and not get it. So they're really bummed out, and training that person to shift their mindset from the result towards the process. Like, as a coach, that's a massively powerful tool. Like, teaching people how not to be binary on their their sort of outlook on life. Like racing isn't about, it's not win or lose. It's like that's the last 2% of what racing is really about. Because the other 98% is everything you learn from racing. And like trying to get a racer that's like bummed out because they had a crummy performance or they crashed or whatever it is, or they set the bike up wrong or whatever it is. But getting to change their mind around so that in 20 minutes or half an hour and an hour's time, and they're walking away and they're saying, you know what, that was an amazing experience. Like I've never gone that fast on the bike before. I've never focused that much before. And trying to train someone to pull out the positives and thrive off the positives in the process, even though the result was not at all what they wanted. That's a huge shift, I think, in like personal skill set, personal, my mind's kind of going blank, but your own skills to control your own outlook and your own mindset on things.
For sure. And you know, to add on to that, any given race is, the results are what they are, but they're temporary. Like there'll be another race.
Yeah.
You know, there's more to do. And so that one result, it's not a summation of your performance.
I love that.
Right. Yeah. So there's more to come. Take what, you know, learn from what happened, whether you did the best or didn't, there's something to learn from it. And then how can we apply that to the next time?
Yeah. And it's almost like teaching people to not put their self-worth on the result and put their self-worth on the process they went through to get there. I think that's a huge thing that I try and teach our kids and my kids, but also the Zep kids too, is it's just getting them to reframe their mind and look at it in a different way. And it's hard to do. Like it's hard to do myself. Like when I've done poorly, you're like, you're pissed because you had a crap race or whatever. Or you thought you were on a heater. You thought, man, that was so fast. And then you're like, oh, it's 6 seconds slower than last year. How the hell did that happen? Yeah. It can be really depressing, but everything takes practice. And that's why racing is good, because if you can do multiple races, it provides multiple opportunities to practice this kind of mindset and focusing on the process, not focusing on the results. There's so many things to learn from racing that have nothing to do with the outcome, with the result.
Absolutely. With that, let's jump into talking about how we race.
That's easy. You just
go fast.
Just go fast.
Just go fast.
Just let the brakes off and give her, eh? As they say in Canada.
Give her to your quiver.
Yeah. Just death grip. And no, obviously not. But for you, Kristian, like what are some things you've done or you help other riders do leading up to a race? Like what are things we do before a race versus what we might do during a race weekend?
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of separate out what are some things prior to racing. So say in the weeks leading up to it that you have control over. And then what are the things that once you get to the race weekend that you don't have control over anymore. And then kind of separate those things out so you can really compartmentalize what you're doing for training. You know, obviously, you know, once it's race time, like your technical skills, your strength, you know, your nutrition and sleep leading up to it, or you know, it is what it is, right? So backing those things up, you know what kind of technical training are you doing leading up to the races might be a good starting point, and really trying to think about, you know, what are the characteristics of the track that you're racing or the course or whatever it is, and then doing some intentional training around that.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. Like, I think terrain is an easy tactic. You know, if you know it's a fast, flowy, paddly course, then make sure you're training in in that kind of terrain, or vice versa. If it's like steep and rocky, then make sure you're riding lots of steep and rocky stuff. So I think the terrain's a good place to start. What about like the speed and intensity? Like I often find, and this is maybe a good reference point. One of our first episodes was slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And there's loads of really cool tips and nuggets in there if anyone's interested in more of the how to race from a technical point of view. There's some great stuff in that episode. But I think another good place to start with the technical side of things is like, if it's a cross country race, is it 40 minute? Is it an hour? Is it an hour and a half? If it's downhill race, is it 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes? And then making sure you're spending time working in that zone so that you get quite comfortable with a 5 minute non-stop downhill, or you get quite comfortable with a 40-minute XC loop or an hour and a half XC loop, because just purely the time frame can really change how you approach it. Like how I'd approach a 40-minute cross-country race to an hour and a half cross-country race is pretty different.
Yeah,
it's very different, versus, and it's the same for like a 3.5 minute track or a 5 minute 20-second track. Like those are big differences. So there I think some good places to start is the type of terrain, and then the sort of the timeline behind the race. What are some other things we can do to help us prep beforehand?
I think thinking about our bike setup, can be a really critical piece for this, and again, kind of pair that with terrain, right? And so making sure that we're being very intentional with trying out, maybe starting with tire choice and pressure, perhaps, and really dialing in all of the specifics to get optimum performance, based on whatever the conditions are. And one of the other pieces to that, just like with tires and pressure in general, is thinking about the difference between the conditions, over a weekend, and how that may change, and are you prepared, with the experience of the different tire choices with what might be coming.
Yeah.
We see that a lot here in the Southeast with, go from dry, dusty to axle deep mud, in
the course of 3 hours,
in the course of a day. And so that has a huge impact on your equipment choice, and also, how you're thinking about getting it set up.
Well, that kind of reminds me of another reason why you should race. Like it forces you to learn resilience and adaptability. Like there's nothing like going through a race weekend and you have this plan in mind, and then it all just goes completely sideways because the weather changes, or your bike breaks, or you thought you were going to get 2 hours training and you only get half an hour because the chairlift shut down, or whatever, right? I think that, just quickly going back to why you should race, like that's just another reason why racing is so good.
Adaptability, resilience for sure. Thinking about other things on your bike, that you have control over, your suspension setup, and dialing it in for expected conditions. And
big one.
I think a lot about frequency of service on suspension.
Yeah.
And if you think about pro racers, it's a full rebuild of everything.
Yeah.
For each race, and amateurs, weekend racers, local racers, probably aren't doing this, but the difference between a fork and a shock that are freshly serviced versus something that has even just 50 hours on it is markedly different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge one. And I've even heard suspension techs talking about, like, people come in and they want X or Y done to their suspension, and they'll feel the suspension. It's like, well, there's no point doing that because you have so much friction in your system right now, like that you've dropped the pressure to make the fork feel softer, but you've done that just because it needs a surface. So why don't we just, so like when you get to the nitty and gritty of it, yeah, I think that's a great reminder. Like sometimes it's not super high tech stuff that people need to do before the race. It could just be something simple as just clean your bike and get the suspension serviced. I mean, if you don't want to get too tech, like that would be an amazing place to start, and I bet your bike would feel better.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And beyond the bikes, thinking about what else are you doing in your kind of your physical space with your body to get ready.
Yeah.
So stretching and any sort of like mobility exercises that we can do are going to be hugely beneficial. And I think that goes not just for racing, but for, if you're riding 3, 4, 5 times a week, that it's a critical thing to do to keep your body ready.
I think a lot of it for amateur races too is just general fitness, just endurance, so that you don't get tired over the weekend, or you at least recover better between practice and race time. Like, it doesn't have to be anything too crazy or different to what you've done before, but just making sure you just your general fitness is good. Or the other thing I sometimes think is, or not, don't do any of it. Just because it's all boils down to what your goal is. Like, if your goal is just to go race, have fun, meet people, then just clean your bike, grab some spare socks, and go race. Like, don't worry, you don't have to do any technical training, any strength and conditioning, any bike setup. If you just want to go check out your first race, like, just take a bike and go race. Like, go have fun, and just swap the word race for ride. Like, I'm just going to go ride, and they happen to time me. So in terms of like prep before the race, I think it's nice to sort of talk about, like, ideally what you should do to optimize your success, your chances of success, but then also, like, realistically, what could you do? And like, there's a ton of races where I've done nothing. I've just cleaned my bike, had a good breakfast, and I've just gone and raced that day. They're like, most of my races have been that. There's been other races where, like, I'll do practice laps, and like when I used to race the Garbanzo race at Crankworks, like, my goal was to get top 20 in Masters, and that Garbanzo race at Crankworks was pretty intense. Like, there's a lot of pros, semi-pros, like a lot of sort of sponsored riders on it, and I was like, top 20 is where I want to get. And so I trained for those races. Like, I would do top to bottom laps, 17-minute descents without stopping, and I would do that all day. I do strength and conditioning. I do a lot of bike setup, line choice, and it's funny. Like, I did all the prep, but it's me doing all the prep just put more pressure on myself to perform. Yep. And then I don't know if the actual race day was nowhere near as fun. But after the race, it was a huge feeling, because I think my best result was 16th or 18th. I can't remember. I think it was 16th, and I passed 2 people. So I was pretty pumped on that. Or 18th, I can't remember. Anyway, and that was an amazing feeling, because it was like, the more effort I put in, the kind of the worse the race was in a way. Like, the more stressful the race day was, but the reward, the relief after the race was way bigger than if I'd just gone in kind of casual. So I think the reward is kind of equal to the effort that you put in. I mean, there's another sort of reason why you should get kids and adults to race, is it really teaches them that relationship. Like, you genuinely put more in. Yes, it's more stressful, but the reward at the end of it is just such a cool feeling when you finally put it together and you get a run or a time that you're proud of. So maybe that's a good sort of thing to talk about, is you could do all of it or none of it. It just depends on what you want out of the race, and that's up to you. It's not up to your mate or the race organizers or anyone else. It's entirely up to you what you want to get out of that race. If you just want to go drink beer and ride down the hill, go do that.
So there's a race series here. It's a 6-hour race, and first year I did it with a buddy. So you can race either as a solo or as a duo.
That sounds like 5 hours, 55 minutes too long for me. But
yeah, it's cross country. race on a very, very cross country course. And the first year I did it with a buddy, we got done and saw the results, and he was like, "Man, we would have won over 40s if I would have entered us over 40." I'm like, "What? You didn't enter us over 40?" And so the next year,
that's awesome.
The next year went into it. I'm like, "We're gonna win. We're gonna win over 40." But it did zero training.
Yeah.
It's always in the spring. And I'm like, we're just gonna go do it. And I did the first lap with I had really didn't have any goals except I'm just gonna go out and crush.
Yeah.
And I had been, the first time I did it, I kind of hung back at the beginning and was mid pack of everybody going into the woods, and ended up passing like 100 people in the woods on the first lap.
Yeah.
And the second year, I'm like, I want to be close to the front as possible into the woods. And I went in with that kind of that speed. And within maybe 5 to 6 miles, I completely blew up. I mean, like, and I had been a person that had not believed when people said, "Man, I blew up and I couldn't finish a race." I'm like, that doesn't really happen. And I absolutely,
it totally happens.
Was in a puddle on the side of the trail. My vision had closed in. Kids were passing me. People on tandem bikes were passing me. Like, I'm just like laying. And I got up and finished it out, but I did nothing to prepare for the race.
That's awesome.
And it ended up being, after that moment, it ended up being kind of fun. But
that's awesome.
Back to your point, it is, what do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, that reminds me of like my daughter Summer, her first cross country race. She was like 7 or 8 or something. And she beat all the girls on the downhill, and it started at the top. There was like a little loop at the top, and then it went to this little downhill, and then this little climb back up. And she was winning, and I was like, "Oh, this is sick. This is like a first race ever." And like, we don't care where she comes. She just wanted her to go have fun on a bike. But she does not like losing. Like, oh my Lord. And 2 girls, one of her best friends passed her on the climb. And she just sat down on the climb and had a full tantrum because she realized she wasn't going to win, and then ended up coming last, I think. But
oh no,
it was a good. It was such a good learning experience for her because her friend ended up winning, and if she had just stayed calm and kept pedaling, she probably would have come like 3rd or 4th. But she had a full meltdown and a tantrum. But it was sweet, and she loves racing now. But the other night she was 3rd because she crashed in warm-up, and so took the race kind of really conservatively, which I was really proud of her because she didn't want to push it and then crash again, and she ended up coming 4th, like a second behind her friend. So she was kind of bummed that she didn't get on the podium, but at the same time she was pumped because she knew that like if she actually had pushed it, she probably would have won or come second or something. And again, that's just another example of how many things you learn. But I think going back to prep before racing, like one thing I think with technical skills is it's interesting watching a lot of amateur racing and seeing how many riders still have fundamental skills that need addressing. Like how many riders are still super low through the whole track, and they don't have the strength and conditioning to hold that position. So they get super tired, and then they start collapsing off the back, or they start getting pushed around by the terrain. So position and balance, trying to get that stability through stacked legs, being nice and tall when they can save energy, and then getting low when they need that range of movement. Like just seeing riders mobile. I think just checking in with your core skills, like your stability and balance, and even just some basic stuff like braking. See some riders just skidding down, like crazy amount of skidding down like steep loose stuff, and then just losing efficiency and control. And it's, it's the 2 core skills of biking. It's like stability and balance and braking. And you get so many amateur racers that could just do with some driveway drills. Yeah. What were you going to say then?
Well, I think with braking, another classic example there is being vague with the braking and not
Yeah.
intentional.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes into the decision making as a skill as well, and not really taking full control of what you're doing on the bike.
They're kind of
Right.
like, I see that's a good one. Like I kind of see a lot of like just dragging their brakes through massive
Yeah.
sections rather
Yeah.
than like just let it off, let it go, and then brake with
Yeah.
intention on that short section there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, getting into your pressure management, just, I mean, all of the skills, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely things that you can prior to the race be
Mm.
focusing in on in training.
I think jumping is a big one. Like it's interesting how many amateur downhill races and enduro races still suck at jumping. And even if there's no jumps on the track, like your ability to sort of deal with compressions, unweight the bike, hop over things, which are all things you often need to do in a race. Same for cross country riders. Like half the time when I'm training cross country athletes, we're in the pump track and we're teaching them to jump because their pressure control and timing skills. There's so much homework to do on that. They can improve them so much, and then they take that into their cross country race, and they're way more efficient on the downhills because they're pumping, unweighting, floating. The little drop or jump isn't throwing them off; they're just carrying speed. So, I mean, if I had to pick like a couple of things to work on in your skills before a race, it's your stability and balance, braking, and some jumping.
Yeah. If you look at our local collegiate national DH champions here in North Carolina,
Yeah.
like we have a pretty good list of folks that have those titles, that have gone to school here at App State and Leeds McRae, and they are just as good at jumping as they are ripping the downhill.
Yeah. I mean, I think my mind's gone blank. What's his Nino? I mean, he's a perfect example. He's 10-time world cross-country champion, and he's probably the best jumper on a mountain bike on the cross-country circuit.
Right.
Yeah. He's got
it's good. Yeah. Good.
Some
good
sick,
advice right there.
Sick tabletops and whips with a seat all the way up.
Right.
That's crazy. I can't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know that I want to do that. But that's why he's Nino and we're not.
Right. Probably there's a couple other reasons there too.
Yeah. Probably. I think. Yeah.
I wonder if he eats donuts.
Yeah. Probably not. See, my buddy of mine. Well, David. Like he's our ED at PMBIA. Like he's cold all the time. Every time I see him, he's cold because he's got no fat on him because he rides too much. So he needs to ride less and eat more donuts. And I need to do the opposite. I need to ride more and eat less donuts.
It's all about balance.
Right? Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Paul, what about during the race and things we should do during the race? We've talked around this a little bit.
I think for coaches, like to talk to the coaches for a second, like it's quite common. I see coaches touching on technical skills. Like, well, think about your knee. Let's warm up with something, I don't know, like twisting our hips or body position, or they'll kind of focus in on a technical skill. And whether you're a rider or a coach, like you mentioned it earlier, like you can't change technical skills in a day or in an evening or whatever. So that's your homework before the race. And then during the race, you should only really focus on the things you can control immediately. So the things you can control in the next 10 minutes or half an hour or 2 hours, you can act. And by control, I mean impact, change. Things like mental skills and decisions. Like, your race can be successful because you chose to do 2 practice laps or 4 practice laps. That's a decision you made. And that can have a huge impact on how your race goes. Or your mental focus, like, are you, with your warm-up lap, so you're just trying to ride at a speed that makes you feel good and builds confidence, or you riding at a speed in your warm-up lap that knocks your confidence, and now you have to be really conservative on your race runs. So the decisions you've made have really impacted your mental skills. So I think from a rider's perspective, being really aware of the things you can change during a race evening or a race weekend, and focusing on that. You can't really change your strength and conditioning. You can't really change your technical skills in a day. So just let those be. So I think a good place to start is trust. Is trusting that you've done the homework and that's helped you. Or if you haven't done the homework, then just trust the skill set that you have. Just trust the fitness and strength that you have, and just work within those limitations. The funny thing I see with people, especially if they're new to racing, is again, it's that silly word race, is they think, oh, I've got to race. You don't have to race. You're at a race, but what you do is up to you. You can go to a race and you can just ride down the track. And learning how to ride fast without crashing takes a lot of time. Takes a long time. So if you're new to racing, a good tactical choice would be to not race.
Right.
A good tactical choice would be just go to the race and ride down and have a fun time and meet some people and do some high fives. And, you know, try and ascertain a baseline. Like, what is a comfortable speed for you that you can ride a new trail without crashing? Where you're not going slow, but you're not necessarily going too fast and out of control. And it's, you know, if you want to put a label on it, it's kind of your race pace baseline, a pace that you can ride any race and not crash. So usually your first race, you've got to focus on those decisions, those tactical skills to build your confidence. If you go to the first race and you race, having never raced, chances are you're going to go too fast and crash. So it's respecting that the people that you see on the internet, if we go back to the beginning, the professional racers, they have spent hours and hours and hours riding really, really fast. So they've got good at it. So when they go to a race, they're not doing something new. They're doing something they've done for years. If an amateur rider goes to a race, you've never raced before. So don't go full ham. So I think mental skills and tactical choices are really the name of the game for the weekend. And then if you're a coach, you know, making sure we don't cause reinvestment. We have this fancy term in coaching, but reinvestment is basically when you consciously start thinking about something that you would normally do unconsciously. And inherently that slows down or impedes the execution of the skill. So a classic one is when you're playing pool or snooker and you've had a couple of beers. It's just enough alcohol to stop you thinking, and then you and then you play way better than you did when you were completely sober. So that's kind of, the alcohol is preventing you from reinvesting. So what you want to do at a race weekend is not drink a bunch of beer and then go race. That's not what I'm saying. But the idea is similar. You want to mentally be in a place where you're not overthinking how you corner or how you brake or where you pump or what your line choice is. You're just letting your riding be autonomous. So as soon as you start thinking about my body position, my braking points, my pressure control, my rotation through the corners, if you go down that technical road, the rider might start to reinvest and start to think about how they're riding a bike too much, and then they'll actually ride a bike worse. So the key there is to sort of steer away from the technical component of your riding and steer towards the mental component of your riding, or the equipment component of your riding, or the tactical component of the riding. Because those things you can think about, and they won't typically impede your performance as much.
Cool. I'd like to add in there kind of your race day routine, something that
Nice.
you can jump into during the race, and thinking about how you're organizing your pit, you know, all of your stuff, you know, and having to some degree a schedule that you're going to follow, you know, for the day. And so the idea here is the more that you can solidify and plan, the less you're going to have to make decisions about.
Yeah.
Right. And so the more that you can relax and focus on what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And so whether that's, you're doing that on your own, or if you have some buddies that are helping out, having all of that dialed in so that you've thought through weather changes, and you've got either tire set or wheel set or, whatever, but everything is scripted so that you're ready to go and not thinking too much.
Yeah. I think
your food and hydration too.
Yeah. And I think those things really steer back towards your mental state, right? Like if you're feeling flustered, disorganized, then that's going to impact how you race for the hour and a half. It's cross-country race. Like if the hour or 2 hours preceding your race, you're calm, you're relaxed because your food's organized, your snack's organized, your bike's clean, you know where the race entry is, you've got extra zip ties for your race plate, whatever it is you have established in your routine, then I think that all boils back to the mental preparation. Is routine requires practice, but routine produces autonomy, and autonomy is the mental space where you can relax and just focus on the one or two things you've chosen to focus on. So I think of a race evening or a race weekend is you're trying to do everything beforehand. So during the race, you can choose to focus on what you want to focus on instead of, oh crap, my tire pressure's low, or whatever it might be, or I haven't had food, or, oh no, I went too hard on that warm-up lap and now I'm feeling tired, or now I'm sore because I crashed, or whatever it might be. So you're trying to set yourself up so when it comes to race time, you can just essentially switch off and just ride.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think the final bullet point here to bring us back around to the beginning is have fun.
Yeah.
Once your planning is done, your prep is done, your homework is checked off, everything that's going on, it's time to have fun in whatever way that means for you. And to just acknowledge that and realize that this is what you've chosen to do it in the way that you want to do it so that you're getting the most out of the experience.
Absolutely. And it kind of ties back to races are expensive. So don't pay that money and then stress out if you're fairly new to racing. Just pay the money and go have a great weekend. And then if you really enjoyed it, you might go to another one. But I think the fun is a huge factor. And, if you listen carefully to interviews with World Cup riders in all disciplines, and the interviewer will kind of often say, like, what are your goals this season? What are your goals this weekend? And these are the best in the world. And I'd say like a majority of the time, 70, 80% of the time, the answer is, I just want to have fun on my bike. And they're talking to like number 4 in the world or number 2 in the world. Yeah, I just want to have fun on my bike this weekend. And I think where it gets really serious is sometimes in that weird sort of, it's that transition from amateur to pro where they're trying to get out of amateur and they're trying to become pro. They're almost like almost too hard on themselves and too serious there. Complete pros, they've got more experience to relax, and then complete amateurs, new to racing, they don't really care. So then they're having fun anyway because it's more about the social side of things. So yeah, I think fun is a huge thing to have during the race weekend because apart from anything else, it just helps you to connect to all the people around you, and it helps you connect to the experience in that moment and not worry about all the what ifs and the what do they think and what if I do that, or what if I crash, or what if I do badly. It doesn't matter. Just go have fun. Be kind to yourself.
For sure. And that feeds into then what happens after the race as well. We've been talking about kind of separating before, during, and after. If we started with fun and we end with fun, then what happens afterwards is, we can kind of live in that memory of this fun experience, getting out of it what we wanted to get out of it, and being content with it.
Yeah.
being content with whatever the performance was as it was, and then drawing those learnings so that you can apply them next time or not. Right?
Yeah, I think the after is just your classic kind of, reflection and projection. You just kind of reflect on what went well. Well, let's do that again. What didn't go well. Okay, well, do we have some solutions for it? And then projection, like what would you like to see next time? What happened this time that you want to see again, and what happened this time that you don't want to see again, or maybe what didn't happen this time but you'd like to happen again. So that kind of reflecting back and then projecting forward, it's just a nice process to go through. No matter how serious or kind of casual you are about your racing, it's just a way for you to analyze and reassess the goals for the next race. And even if you never race again, maybe it's just a way to sort of, what did I learn? Okay, how can this influence my riding from here?
Absolutely. Well, Paul, cover some cool ground here. I really like the approach that we've taken here with racing.
Yeah,
kind of encouraged me to think about wanting to maybe do a little racing in the summer.
Yeah, I feel bad because I've missed the first 2 Fat Wednesdays because I've been real busy with the new 2023 materials for PMBIA, and I just want to get them done. And one of my coaches was giving me grief for missing the race last night. But this is making me want to go back and do a race. And it's just so much fun. I just don't care about the results at all. It's everything else. There's just so much to learn from it and so much personal growth, to be a cheesy term, I know, but it's true. Like, it's just so much to gain from racing that has zero to do with the results.
Right. Well,
so
awesome.
I guess we need to do donuts, eh?
Yes, let's.
That's what you should do after races. You should eat donuts because you've worked hard and you deserve it.
You've earned it. You deserve it. And you've earned it.
And they go well with beer or milk if you're at a kids' race. Yeah, so it's a win-win. You said you had a donut of the day.
I do. I had a first recently. I ran a PMBIA tech course recently, and day one, one of the participants who's a fan of the show brought homemade chocolate glazed donuts.
Homemade
chocolate glazed
donuts. So he made them. Oh,
and they were amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had to inform him that it didn't have any bearing on his evaluation whatsoever. But they were, oh my gosh, they're absolutely amazing. Just dense and But I couldn't remember a time that I ever had homemade donuts.
Well, that's funny you say that, because Shannon ordered some new pots and pans the other day, or baking trays. I think it was baking trays. Yeah. And apparently it comes with one free donut tray thing to make baked donuts. So it's like the shape of a donut. Anyway, they screwed up the order and they sent us 2 sets of everything. So now we have 2 donut trays. So obviously that means when we move house, I'm going to have to make donuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Which is cool. So yeah, nice, man.
Yeah.
Well, hey, a little note to our listeners. It's season 3, so please feel free to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. If you're interested in any Donuts and Bikes merch, Kristian and I are looking into it with some stickers, maybe mud guards, hats, socks. So let us know. And then, please reach out to us through Instagram in our comments feed. Anything you have to say about the podcast you like, or ideas for topics in the future, please feel free to let us know, and we'll be happy to keep building this podcast. And the more support we have from you all, the more resources it can provide us for building a longer platform here and a better platform here to build this podcast. In the meantime, we really appreciate all of the comments and responses we've had so far from you all. Kristian and I are having a great time doing this podcast. And if you like it, please share and subscribe.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show and that it sparked some ideas for your writing and your coaching. As always, our approach to coaching is on pros and cons, not rights and wrongs. And with that in mind, our podcast is meant to be more of a conversation about topics and techniques rather than a final say in how to ride or how to teach. As always, please take care if using or applying any of the techniques discussed in this podcast. Stay safe, ride smart, and we'll see you next time.